All right, hello and welcome to Plugging Along, a stream dedicated to LOTRO plugins. Last time on Plugging Along, we did a few UI improvements to the Soliloquy of Spirit and Inner Strength tracker, like changing the background color when a player is about to lose their Inner Strength Tier 3. Today, we're going to add a border to show the selected player and see if there's any other little refinements we want to do before shipping this out as version 1. As always, feel free to jump into chat with your thoughts and questions. And in the meantime, I'm going to reposition a window here and maybe just review what we're talking about here. All right. Okay, we have a standard chat window. We've set this up with error and standard and quest. That's been useful for some plugin development. And all right, let's go ahead and load up our in-game plugin manager. And hello to Zoe, or Zoe, who has spoken out into chat. Hello. All right, so we have our plugin manager here for Lord of the Rings Online. And we have the Minstrel Buff plugin, which is what we're adapting for this purpose. When we first load it, if we don't have any settings to say otherwise, the main Minstrel Buff window shows up in the upper left-hand corner, and so does the Soliloquy tracker, which I'm just going to drag over here to the middle. And then in our options, we'll want to make sure that Use Soliloquy Tracker is checked, and I don't worry about the rest of it right now. All right. Well, we could say that's only visible. Well, no, it's fine. Okay. So what we're looking at is when a minstrel is in the blue line Watcher of Resolve stance, they get access to Soliloquy of Spirit, which is a heal over time that can be targeted on a friendly player, and that can be stacked up to 3 times. Let me tear that off here. So if I do that on myself, we can see, oh, that's a little bit high up on the screen. We can see this stacking up right here. Okay, so what do we have? We have 3 Soliloquy of Spirits. That's the maximum number of stacks. And our inner strength is also tier 3. Each tier gives us plus 1% physical and tactical mitigation. So having that at tier 3, especially for your tank or anyone else who needs that mitigation, that's pretty handy. We can see the box is turned red here because inner strength is about to run out. And that's a little bit of trickiness because inner strength only has a 30-second duration, which we can see from this tooltip, and the Soliloquy of Spirits start off with a 45-second. Oh, and we've turned yellow because one of the Soliloquy of Spirits has dropped off. So we can go ahead and refresh those. We're tracking that manually. We just say when we see this happen, we know each of them either takes 45 seconds or 30 seconds, so we just start a timer. And then we don't have to deal with checking the actual effects on the player or the, a target to see what's going on. Okay, so that's the Soliloquy of Spirit. Now, a thing I could use is some sort of a target. I wonder if any of my friends are online. All right, we have a Morgan Neat who's in Frostbluff. Well, that's sad because Frostbluff is over. Okay, so Morgan Neat's gonna come on over to where I am. And so in the meantime, we can actually already see the problem is I would very much like when this character is selected to have some sort of a box around that to show, yeah, you've selected that character, or more importantly, you don't have that character selected. So let's bring up our code and see what would that look like. Okay, so, oh, I don't need that anymore. Okay, just closing windows in the background here. So, as always, we're just going to bring up a text editor. You can use whatever you like, including Notepad, but I do encourage you to invest in something a little bit better if possible. We're going to go ahead and use Sublime Text today and go to our documents and Lord of the Rings Online and plugins and Minstrel Buff window, and bring up that Soliloquy tracker window. Excellent. And now, a thing that is useful to think about is, what does it mean to have a border? One of the plugins I like to keep in mind, because I'm slavishly borrowing ideas from it, is called Mini Raid. So let's go ahead and actually install that right now. I like using the LOTRO plugin compendium to install plugins. And in this case, I'm going to go ahead and search for Mini Raid and click it and say add. And we can see very fast at the bottom here, it downloaded, extracted, and installed all of those files. Fantastic. Thanks, plugin compendium. And then back in the game, do remember, if you change your plugins directory, you need to hit that green arrow to refresh, and then Mini Raid is there. We'll go ahead and load that up. Ah, hey, there's a Morganite. Are you in range? You're in range. Thanks, Morganite. All right, so Mini Raid is on, but by default you don't see it. So I'm going to do /mini raid space options, and here we go. I'm going to go ahead and enable the UI quick button, both because it looks cool and it's very handy. And we'll go ahead and enable the layout preview and show it when I'm not in a party. Excellent. All right, so we're going to move that thing around a little bit so we can see, and then pop our options back on and turn off that preview. Great, just a little configuration. So we have Mini Raid, which I use as an alternate to trying to track everyone's health, especially when there's more than a few of us. So one of the things I really like about this, and you know what, I'm going to go ahead and invite Morganite to my fellowship. So we have 2 here to play around with. All right, awesome. So when I click on Tidaless, I get a little box around there. When I click on Morganite, I also get a little box around there. And if I'm not clicked on either of us, there's no box. That's exactly the idea that I want to implement here for us. Excellent, and now Morganite is dancing with us. Okay, so same idea. If I have put Soliloquy of Spirit on myself or on Morganite, when I click on one of these, I want to go ahead and draw a box around that. Now, an important thing is, in general, you can't draw outside the bounds of your window that you're drawing in. So we should have a sense of where that window is. I'm going to come in to the window, and one of the things you can do when you're playing around with UI layouts is just set a solid background color. And in this case, we have self.window set back color. I think, actually, let's double check the name of that, because I sometimes just want to say set background color, and then I just get myself confused. So we'll pop open the API documentation. You can download this from LOTRO interface, from the LOTRO wiki. I'm sorry, LOTRO interface wiki. And we're going to come into turbine.ui, go to window, and take a look. And we can see color, get back color, set back color. Excellent, set back color. So we want to go ahead and set that. We know it's going to take a turbine color, which is a turbine.ui.color. Excellent. Turbine.ui.color. Now, one place this version of the documentation falls down is it doesn't really spell out enumerations. So I do like the one hosted on LOTRO Interface Wiki for this kind of a what is out there. If we come into turbine.ui, come into color, we can see, oh yes, here's a bunch of predefined values that are probably good. Plum sounds great. We're going to go ahead and set the background color to turbine.ui.color.plum. Now, I don't actually think that's going to do very much, because I think those bars currently cover all of the window. But let's go ahead and see. We're going to load a mini raid. The other one. We're going to load a minstrel buff. Oh, well, we can see a very thin bar there. So it looks like the minimum size of the window is 1 tall, and then we make it bigger or smaller, by the amount of these bars. And the problem is there's no space for a border in that window, and if we try to put the border outside the window, it's not going to show up. Let's take a look and see what that means. And You know what? Before I start making changes, let's go ahead and pull up our source control interface. In this case, I'm using the program called Fork. And we're going to go ahead and see if there are any unsaved changes that we want to take a snapshot of before we start messing about. Okay, so we have a couple of debug style things here. That's not a problem. Okay, there's our new code. Okay, we're doing great. Nothing to save off from last time that we might accidentally mess up. Okay, so we have a window, and that window, if we go ahead and look at the set size, we can see it's kind of hard-coded to 142 and 1, which is not great. We can see we even have a note here to fix that. But instead of fixing it, I'm going to break it even more. We're going to go ahead and mark this as 200 and 200. Unload, reload, and we can go ahead and, excellent. So one of the things we're able to see here is that the window is getting bigger in with the height of each row. And if we got rid of one of these rows, the window gets smaller. That's excellent. Exo says, why code when you can just break things in a helpful way? Absolutely. Sometimes I know what I'm doing. Sometimes I think I know what I'm doing. But a lot of times, my mental model of what the LOTRO Lua interface is going to do is unclear. And the easiest thing to do is just, okay, what if we do this? What if we do that? And one of the nice things is we're working in a sandbox here. So worst case scenario, and this happens very rarely, we might cause the LOTRO client to crash, but in general, we'll just cause our plugin to crash. Or it'll work and it'll do something strange like put a plum box on the screen. Right, there's a lot of wiggle room for playing around here. All right. Exo says, my mental model of the API scroll bar control failed so deeply, I had to just build a custom one. Absolutely, like that can happen. I have to kind of relearn how the scroll bar works every time I get into it. And I don't know that it's a particularly weird implementation. I just don't deal with scroll bars very much. So that's a whole other thing. Okay, so we have a sense of how big this box is. Now, just to play around, let's go ahead and make a new control, self.deleteMe equals turbine.ui.control. And we do want this to show up, so we're going to go ahead and parent this. So set parent to self.window. We're going to self.deleteMe. We're going to set the position to be, let's say 100 by 100, so halfway down, halfway over, since we know it started out 200 by 200. And importantly, delete me is going to be set size. It's also going to be 200 by 200, and we'll have a different background. Delete me, set back color, and turbine.ui.color. Well, I don't know. Is there something that's also appetizing, like a blueberry? Oh, chocolate. Love it. That's exactly like a blueberry. Okay, so let's just throw that on there and see what happens. And here's what I was alluding to, and here's how my mental model works, is that the window defines an area on the screen that you can paint, you can do whatever you want, you can put controls in there. As soon as you get outside the bounds of the window, the thing exists, but you can't see it. Those pixels don't get painted. And so there is a 200 by 200 chocolate, that's a very strange chocolate, but okay. Chocolate colored box here, same size as the plum, but we're only seeing the top left quarter of it. And so if we want a border to show up, it has to be within the bounds of the window, and the window currently is the same size as the rows it contains. So that's going to be a sticking point. So, Exo says, may I introduce your mental model to set stretch mode 1? It will destroy your ideas of visibility. I am aware that stretch modes can alter this concept of the bounds of a window. And that's why I did mention before, in general, because there are ways to break this. But I think the easier thing, instead of getting into stretch modes, will be just making the window a little bit bigger to account for that border. But yes, absolutely. Stretch modes are a thing to look into. There's a really handy, I think it's on the LOTRO forums, on the guide for beginners. Let's see. Let's pull that up here. So the full title is Writing LOTRO Lua Plugins for Noobs. And in here, set stretch mode, there's a whole section talking about the various stretch modes and what they mean. So this is a great resource to go back to when you are like, oh, I want to do a thing. What does a stretch mode 3 mean? Yeah, Exo says, I think stretch mode only matters when you start getting into texturing stuff / using images in general. Yeah, when I was doing the Hunter Deadly Decoy, one of the things I wanted to do was be able to change how big it is. So this is where the stretch mode was very handy, where I could just say, yeah, game, I know it's a 32 by 32 icon, please make it 150 or whatever. I guess this is 320 because I said max of 10 makes sense, or as low as 16 by 16, really, right? So you can have the game stretch things. Very useful when you're dealing with images. Not so useful in this particular instance. All right, so loading minstrel buffs. Let's go ahead and get rid of this delete me stuff, and I'll keep the plum actually. That'll be handy, but. What am I even thinking? We should probably pull up our to-do file and see. All right, first thing we're talking about here. Adding border around selection target. And remember to do something if our target row disappears. Okay, so, oops. What is this gonna look like? If we pull mini raid back up, this is sort of the mental model that I have, is that white border around these things. If we were to take a screen grab of that, we could even count how many pixels there are quite easily. We can just pull that into something like MS Paint, blow it up, and say, oh, that is, what, 2 pixels wide? 2 pixels wide, great. So if we're slavishly imitating mini raid here, we can just go ahead and say, let's start by thinking about a border that is 2 pixels wide and go from there. So if I have a row on here, I click here, I want there to be 2 pixel wide white border all the way around. Exo says, you looked at mini raid's UI code? You know, I have looked at mini raid's UI code. It is, I'm not going to say it's an abomination. It is overly complicated for what we're doing here today. It is handling a lot, but it has kind of the right idea. And to dig into it a little bit, there's 2 ways to think about doing a border. Either the window itself just slaps a border on top of the row that is currently selected, or each row has an optional border that either turns on or off if it thinks it's selected. You can do either. The benefit of having the border go with the row is we get that cleanup when the row goes away kind of for free, right? Because the row disappears, the border goes with it. But we have a complication because a border isn't really a thing in LOTRO Lua. You can just draw 4 little rectangles around the border, and that, you know, where you want your border to be, and that's the border. Yes, Little Redhead, it's an abomination. Exo says, I believe mini raid created a border with a transparent center that they attach as a border. I wanted to say that it looked like they were just doing the left, right, top, and bottom. I could be wrong. I didn't spend a lot of time digging into it because it looked like, while very effective, it was more than I wanted to get into. And so from a basic standpoint, yeah, you can either, you can have a phone that's going, having an alarm going off. Just a moment. That's exciting. Create a control with set stretch mode that you shape to be a border. Now, we actually have a convenience here because the borders are a fixed width. We don't have to worry about stretching or sizing. We know exactly how big this control is going to be. It could render outside the borders that way and it can essentially be attached. That's an interesting idea. I was thinking maybe just create a control that the rest of the controls are in, and it just has a background, and then the rest of the control. Yeah, see, the problem is I don't want a white background behind everything. I just want the edges. And I want there to be transparency available. So the color of this, I don't want it to pick up anything in the background. And so that's why I keep leaning towards just having a left, a right, a top, and a bottom that is the border. And then we just have to decide, is there one of those that the window controls, or is there one per row? Now, if there's one per row, that's the second question of, am I drawing outside the bounds of the control, and is that going to be a problem? And so I think I'm leaning toward just having a single border that I just move around to the right position, and we'll see how that goes. Okay, so that's sort of where my mental model is. So window, create a border control that has left, right, top, bottom rectangles. Move the border control over the selected row, and then we'll just have the one border to play with. If that's possible, the real question is, how do we know when a row is targeted? Do we already know that? I can't even remember. But we can find out what the target of the player is. We probably need that anyway at this point. So if the window knows the target has changed, the window can check if any of our rows is that target and use that information. That sounds like a thing that we could do. All right, so target, we don't have anything target in here. Let's go ahead and attach ourselves to the target changed and see what that looks like. All right, I'm going to close the writing LOTRO. I'm going to close this. And we're going to come back, and we're actually interested in the gameplay.local player. Now, the plugin as a whole already has a local player. So if I do local player, let's see, where are we? No, we want to go ahead and do a recursive search in the minstrel buffs. Cool, we can see local player all over the place in here. The real question is, there are events, and target changed is one of them. And it looks like target changed is not currently being used by minstrel buffs. Excellent. We're going to go ahead and use that. So local player dot target changed equals an anonymous function. Whoops. Taking, what does this one do? Probably pretty standard, yep. Taking the sender, some arguments, and then we can do what we want with that. We're going to actually dispatch that to a function that, I don't know, we'll just call it right here. Function, soliloquy tracker window, handle target changed. Neat. Now, two things. We can either look directly at the local player target, or we can pass in a name. Passing in a name gives us more opportunities for debugging later, where we can just spoof it out and say, pretend like this has happened. So that's kind of where I'm trying to lean. In which case, we have a get target method. All right, local target, oops, equals local player get target. Now, if the target has been cleared, they're no longer selecting anything. This is going to be null, or nil. We do need to check for that. If target is not nil, then okay. Then what? Local target name equals. Well, what is get target? Get target is an entity. Awesome. Entities have a function called get name. Exo says, I think I would actually need to go make my set stretch mode border control. Oh, You actually need to go do that. Let me build borders of any size with a single line. Thanks for the inspiration. Awesome. I am looking forward to seeing what that would be like. I don't think my brain's in a space to play with set stretch mode today. So I'm gonna go the brute force way of making my own little border control. But even with that, we're gonna have an ability to set the size of it, set the width, set the height, have custom border sizes. It won't take very much code to do that either. So stick around either way. All right, so we have a target name, and then again, we don't need to check if this is nil. It should always return something. We could, but we could just go ahead and dispatch and say self handle target changed with the target name. And then handle target changed has a target name. Sweet. Okay. And we can test that this works by doing turbine.shell.writeLine and just say target name and go ahead and concatenate that in, target name. That'll of course fail if target name is nil, but that's a price I'm willing to pay for a really fast test. All right, so I've selected myself, target name, Tedlos, excellent. I've selected, oh wow, these hobbits are multiplying, that's excellent. Azure Stain, Morganite, and Turquoise, we can see that. And then, oh, you know what? We do need to know if the target has deselected, don't we? Yes. Okay, new plan, local target name equals nil. And then either way, we're going to go ahead and handle the target changed. And in here, if target name is nil, then we're going to go ahead and say target cleared. Get rid of that reference to that, and then we'll have an else in here, else, and now we have a name. Okay, so Tedlos, target cleared, Azure Stain, target cleared, Turquoise, Morganite, target cleared, perfect. All right, so we are getting what we're expecting to here. We're getting either nil, and in fact, we could even document this. Target name is, if target name is nil, then we clear the selection. If target name is not nil, then we select a row if present. Because we could be targeting something that is not an actual player that we are healing. In fact, quite often we're targeting something else. Okay, so great. Now we need a border control to manipulate, but it would also be nice to have a sense of where is this row. So we already have a way to say to iterate through rows, or I should say iterate through the list box and interact with the rows there. Rows have a sense of what their name is. So we could actually hoist this out and use something similar. So we have the count of the things in the list box, and we have a row that we're getting from get item, and then if row dot, oh, what did we call it? We did a rename last time, and this is where just digging into the internals like this is a little risky, but we called it patient name. We were calling it player name before, and that seemed a little off. So if row dot patient name equals target name, then, well, we're not doing that. Turbine.shell.writeLine found, target is row number, and we'll just concatenate that row. Row number I. Okay. So if that's the case, then when I click on me, target is row number 1. When I click on Morganite, target is row number 2. When I click on someone else, they're not in there. Awesome. Okay, so we still need a border control, but now we have the ability to either find a row where it should be, or if we don't find that, or if no one is being selected, we can get rid of it. Okay, so we need a border control of some sort. Now, this could be a reusable thing that we want to make use of again and again. So let's actually make a new file and call this border.lua. Awesome. Now, we are going to be using a the control from turbine.ui. So just remembering how to write an import statement here. We want to go ahead and say turbine.ui. And because we are going to be deriving ourselves from the turbine.ui.control. We're going to be a control. Now, if you're like me, you might not remember how to do class declarations in Lua. It's different than any other language I have done. So when that's the case, I go look at another example of it working. And we can see this is how we do a class declaration here. I'm going to go ahead and have to change some stuff. So border control. Oh, you know what? I should call it border control instead of just border. So let's go in and rename this file. Border control, although that has different connotations. Ah, well. This is going to be a turbine.ui.border. No, control. Perfect. And then we need to have a constructor, or what I would call a constructor in any other language, and we're calling it constructor here, so that seems pretty reasonable. So this is a border, and are we getting settings? What do we need? We need three things. We need a border width, initial width, initial height. Which implies that we expect we can change this later, right? Like we can probably support functions. In fact, let's just spec them out right now. Function border set width, new width, and function border control set height, new height. And you know, it occurs to me that we're essentially overloading a function name here that already exists. And there's a way to do that where you can pass the remaining logic onto the parent class. I happen to remember that the timer control does this, so I'm just going to go look and see what it does. And we can see that we can call turbine.ui.control.setWidth. Excellent. And we can pass that on right there. So we're going to do something with the internals of our control, and then the control itself can keep on processing that function. And we'll want to remember to do that with the height as well. Turbine UI control set height. And we'll copy paste that variable name also. And then the final thing, function border control set border width. New border width. And then this, I probably don't see using very much here, but I could see maybe there's a use for only having a single pixel wide or multiple pixels wide. And so if we just think we're going to support that, even better. Okay, so we have some basic functions, and of course there is no control function for set border width. Pretty sure I'm going to be a little embarrassed if there is. Border, nope. Since the control doesn't have a function of that name, we're not going to go ahead and pass that execution on up to the parent. Okay, still not sure what this is going to look like, but we have some basic ideas. Now, generally, if you have a set function, you could also have a get function, but we know turbine.ui.control already has get width and get height, as well as other things. In fact, if we're going to support these, then we should probably support set size as well. for new width, new height, and same thing, we want a punt continuation of that on up to the parent. EXO has come back 10 minutes later saying, hey, it works, awesome. Got any screenshots to throw into some Discord that I have access to? Yours was faster. Excellent. So we're going to go ahead and pass, oops. Excuse me, I've got something in my throat. We're going to go ahead and pass both the width and the height on to the base set size. Oh, Mule sales are still up. Please let there be a task carry-all. Please let there be a task carry-all. I'm being told not to get my hopes up. But Hope Springs... Ah! I still don't know why the street of Mickeldoving shows up. Yeah, the word carry must be in there. Oh, carry all your amenities. We should ask them to change that. It's a tease. There's something else down there. Oh, it's the wrong one. Oh, well. Oh, you put it in the LOTRO Discord for me. Awesome. Well, I'll go ahead and start Discord up here in the background because I want to see that. Okay, so we have a width and a height, and if you're going to overload one of those functions, it's a good practice to go ahead and take set size and fix it as well. Even if under the covers, we're just doing self set width with new width and self set height with new height. You know, even if we're just doing that. Okay, Lord of the Rings Discord. Neat. I see the code there. Is there an image? I don't see an image yet. Yes, as EXO and Little Red have pointed out in chat, there are multiple LOTRO Discord servers, primarily because there is no official Discord server, and so various fan groups or various people have popped up their own. Okay. So what we have here is a little bit too wide here. Multiple pixel border. Now, is that red all the way underneath there and it's just being obscured by what it is bordering? Or has the stretching process made the background transparent in that fashion? EXO has posted this code here for those who are not in the Discord server. So what do we have? We have a border equals class, turbine, constructor, setback color, set parent, set size. Nice. Okay, so EXO says the red is on top, the inner frame is transparent. Oh, so EXO is a cutout. I need to set the mouse visible false on the whole thing. That's a good point. Okay, so the cutout here, you're taking the thickness. Well, I gotta say, yours has come together much faster than mine will. I suppose we could just hoist this into our own working code. But let's see. So we have the background color of the control, and then a cutout that is see-through with the opacity dialed down to 0 and a black color. We have the size of the parent. Oh, interesting. So these things are being drawn over the parent. And because of stretch mode 1, they can render outside the bounds of the parent, as what we were talking about before. You know what? Let's go look at some of this documentation. Set stretch mode. Okay. Scale an image based on the size it had when the stretch. Now it says scale an image. I believe it just scales a control whether or not there's an image on there or not. It automatically resizes. Okay. Exo says you pass in the thing you're adding a border to, it automatically resizes to match that. Now, with the stretching, if you say you want it 2 pixels wide, and do you get that? You must. Yeah, because we're setting the size here to the width of the parent and the thickness. Okay, yeah. And setting the position to a negative offset. Nice. And yes, okay, so what EXO is pointing out is that we're not actually stretching things, we're using this to cause an image to exceed the bounds of its parent. Now, EXO, can that work on a window, the top level control also, or does it still have to be smaller than the whatever the top level drawable control is? Okay. And and that's important. If the mouse event, if you're trying to click on the thing, those clicks have to be within the parent. Okay, EXO says it'll break even out of the top level control, which is fantastic. Okay. So I guess there's a question of, do we continue developing one that just has sides and whatnot, or do we just use this one and call it good? I like this one. But I don't think it would take too much longer to have a left, a right, a top, and a bottom. So I'm good with either. Certainly, drawing outside of the parent makes life easier, because then we don't have to account for, oh no, we need to account for the size of this border everywhere. Yeah, well, EXO, if you don't mind, I think maybe we'll just grab this and run with it. Maybe rename a few things, get that mouse visible in there. You gave it to me. Well, you gave it to the community, and I appreciate that. Hopefully I count as part of the community. All right. Would be odd to take it back. Well, you could be taunting me. Look at this awesome thing that you didn't think of. Excellent. Now, back to the naming. You know, I went with border control initially because I felt like border was just kind of vague. But now that I think about it, all the rest of these things are controls, and we don't use control in them. And so I like that. So we're going to go ahead and just say border. It says it might need some polish. Yeah, that's a good point. We can pay attention to the resize of the parent as well if we wanted to automatically resize. Not important in this particular function because these rows never change size. But if we wanted to put this as a library out on LOTRO interface, as has been done with things like the drag bar, it might be nice to support that. And of course, when you get into arbitrarily latching onto events, we get into the idea of the add callback and remove callback helper functions, which we're not going to have to bother with here, but we would want to use those so that we don't smash someone else's size monitoring callback as well. But everyone does have to be on the same page about that. So if one person is just saying the callback function is this, and another person is using add callback and remove callback, it does not end well. So, okay, so we can see, custom color. How luxurious. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and modify this a little bit, but we already have these helper functions in here. So instead of, we'll go ahead and say parent, you said thickness, I said border width. Yeah. Thickness sounds good. And we can grab that initial width and initial height off of the parent. I like having color. That's nice. All right. So what are we going to do? We're going to go ahead and get this in here. Okay. So what do we see? We see set background color of that color. And you know what? I'm superstitious. I always like making sure the parent is first. Background color, the size. This line's a little bit long, so I'm just going to go ahead and break it into 2. And this is just a matter of taste. There's nothing right or wrong about spaces or no spaces between operators. It's just what I'm used to. Okay, so we have the thickness One thing I wonder is, do we want to save that off? I'm going to err on the side of yes. Self.thickness equals thickness. And we'll come back to that and see if that's true. Okay, so we have set position, excellent, and we have the cutout. It is also a control setting parent to self, good. First thing, love it. We're setting that background color to nothing. Setting the size, excellent, because the other is just big enough. Position, that much in, yes. And setting the, oh, interesting. What's the blend mode do? I feel like I should know this. Blend mode. Let's see. It would override the background color unless you set back blend mode to blend with the image. Okay. Oh, good. Exo says a blend mode gets wacky. So what have we said? Blend mode 1. Okay. Whoops. Let's go over to control. Set blend mode. The new background blend mode. Excellent. Sometimes the API documentation is a little light on the actual details. All right, and if we say set blend mode here, do we have anything better? Oh, one of the values specified in blend mode, excellent. We can see color performs a blend of a new color generated by applying hue and saturation, source and the value. Excellent. I'm assuming if setting it to value 1 means that if you have a completely transparent foreground, then whatever's in the background shows through, which would be lovely. That's exactly what I would like to see. Okay, and if I'm remembering correctly, then yes, blend mode does show up in this documentation as well. Oh, Exo says, I'm not actually sure it's needed. That's fair. We can actually play around with that in a little bit. Is this needed? All right, and we also have a set stretch mode to 1. Now, my understanding is if we actually want to, after this, resize the thing but not scale it up, then we'd want to set that stretch mode to 0, do the resize, and then set the stretch mode back to 1. Does that sound like it matches your expectations, Exo? Exo says yes. Excellent. So, in these set width and set height functions, if we want to be able to change it later, and I do want to play around with that, I think, we'll want to keep that in mind. Okay, in fact, the set border width, set width, and set height functions might all just have a single function that essentially does a lot of this. So function border resize for thickness, width, and height might very well look like this. Set size, set size. Set size, width, height. And then self, resize, thickness, and then we can do parent get size. Okay. And that means we should be able to do the same thing. Actually, let's protect ourselves and put the stretch mode in here. So self set stretch mode of 0, and then of 1 back here. Oh, so many spaces. Okay, and then set border width. Then we would just say self resize, new border width, and then do we have our parent? Do we save our parent? We don't. That might be useful. I have more parents. Someone from chat says, wave, hello, person in chat. I wave back to you. Could save or just use self get parent. That's a good point. We do already have parent in there. Okay, so we have self get parent get size. And just to verify that that's what that looks like, get parent, excellent. It's the parent. I don't call that one very often. I kind of forget that it's there. All right, so we have a new width, same thing, self resize. You know, it's funny. Self dot thickness equals thickness. I think saving that off makes a certain amount of sense because then I can just say self dot thickness and then new width and then self get parent get height. Same thing in the height, but the opposite. Resize. We have self thickness. We're going to do self get parent get width and then new height. Okay, and then one final wrapper. Self resize self dot thickness and then new width, new height. Sure, that all might actually work. Exo says, is the reason you would adjust individual side border widths? I don't know, but I come from a C++ background, and if you've done operator overloading there, and this is just what comes to my mind. If you do an overload of, say, less than, then it's kind of it's kind of important to individual border widths. Hang on a sec. So if you overload a less than function, it's on you to also overload less than equal to, and probably also greater and greater than equal to, right? They come in match sets. Now I'm thinking just in case you'd want the border to not match the parent, these are in here. This is probably silly and overkill. But I already had the functions there, so it was an interesting mental exercise. So the idea being that you start just being exactly on top of the thing that you're on, but maybe you want it to be bigger in some fashion. I don't think that's likely to happen, and I might end up just deleting all of that just as it was a fun mental exercise. But that's what's going on here. Now, for the border width, I am assuming the actual number of pixels is going to be the same all the way around. So, begin section that should maybe just be deleted. And a section that should maybe just be deleted. Cool. So that's what's in there. Is I had the idea that maybe it makes sense to allow this thing to get bigger or smaller, but really this might just be a stopgap for not monitoring the changing size of the parent. Like if we change the parent, then we'd come back in here and say, at least refresh yourself and go to the parent. But yeah, like I said, maybe this is all just a silly thought exercise and should not actually go into the final version. The border width, again, probably not going to happen, but I could see some benefit to like bolding something. If it's your target and you should do something like, hey, you could almost make a thing flash by making it 3 pixels, 2 pixels, 3 pixels or something. So this is as a maybe. Do we even need this function? Okay, so we can make a note to future me to worry about that later. But we have a separated resize function, and also, as you mentioned, we do want to go back to control and mouse. Is mouse visible? We want to go ahead and set mouse visible to false. We don't want this to absorb any mouse clicking. Or if we absorb mouse clicks, we could pass it on to the parent. That's an interesting question. Though if the border is extending beyond the parent, then no, we wouldn't get the mouse anyway. So we'll go ahead and say set mouse visible to false, make a toggle. On that front, might want to change color, make a toggle. Yes, I was thinking that as well. If the background's changing to red, maybe this will change to red. I liked the idea of the color being optionally changeable. There we go. Okay, so we have a set mouse visible to false. And we'll call out this set blend mode with some white space. Do we even care about that? Exo says, the best bit is now that we've created this, I need to go back and delete a bunch of nested controls I've created for borders. Yeah, I can see that. If you want the code from this and don't want to retype it in yourself or whatnot, just hit me up on Discord. I'll send you the raw text here. But obviously, it's not much different than what you've done. Just more stuff, most of which you probably don't care about anyway. Okay, so we have a border control class, and now that I've renamed it, let's go ahead and rename the file that it's in also. Border.lua. All right. You need to listen to parent visible changed. Do you? Fascinating. Am I listening to, or am I worried about that? I mean, the other option is the parent's responsible for hiding its border if it thinks the border should be changed. Or is, all right, let's play around with having this first. And so what we have is, Exo says, I'm in a nested control system, and if the parent goes invisible, it gets shunted to the top left. Excellent. We'll keep an eye out for that. All right, so the idea is each row is going to have its own border. And so I'm going to go ahead and pull the border off to the right here. And then in our constructor of the row, we have a constructor. Excellent. Let's go ahead and after everything else, let's go ahead and self.border equals border. And that is self. And we're going to do a thickness of 2. In fact, local border thickness equals 2. And local border color equals turbine.ui.color.white. Okay, then we don't have to worry about those magic variables, border thickness and border color. Exo says might be a tree view thing with that problem he's experiencing, or they are experiencing. I am in a list view. We're gonna see how well this works with that. Okay, so we also want a self.border set visible to false, because we only want to show this thing when it's time to hey, I've been selected. All right, a lot of code changes there. One thing that we still need to do is in main, and I don't have a firm grasp of this in Lua, like is there a standard? But it feels like to me, if row is the thing that's depending on border, then row should be the one that imports border with an import statement. Not the main file, and yet everywhere I see the main is the one that imports all of them, and so I default to that, but Exo says, list views don't hide things, so should be safe, although if your list view is bigger than your parent, the borders may be visible while the list items aren't. In this case, the list view is exactly the size of the window. I think mine is 1 pixel in the vertical because it was causing drag bars some problems to have a window that had no height. So the window's always 1 pixel high, and then it gets bigger or smaller. Okay, so we have import border. Okay, so in this constructor, we're using that border, and I think this is a good time to just try to load and see what kind of syntax errors we have. Apparently none. This is suspicious. I get suspicious when it just works. Although most of the code was X's, so that is probably why. Okay, so we do want to respond to that target changed. And so now we have a row. Okay, we need a function. Select. Okay, so we need a function to handle selection. Function, Soliloquy tracker row, handle selected. If handle target changed, target name. So I'm just thinking through, if the border is on, we want to turn it off if necessary, and if it's off and the name matches, we want to turn it on. So if target name equals self.patientName, then self.border set visible true. Else, but we're doing the classic thing where we're just passing on a true or false variable that we've already calculated into the function. This thing, if it's true, then it's true. If false, then false. Okay. So local should border be visible equals that, and then self.border set visible should border be visible. There we go. We do not need an if-else statement there. So the result of this is going to be a Boolean. If it makes you feel better, you can surround it in parentheses, but I don't think you have to. I find it's a little bit easier to read visually, though. It's like, oh, yes, that's the thing on the right. Cool. So target name equals self.patientName, and either true or false. Okay, well, now we have a function. And in fact, that means we don't actually care at this level. We're just going to say row, handle target changed, target name. But if that's the case, then we don't care about target name being nil, because it's not going to match anything, and then they'll all deselect. And then our function just looks like this. Iterate through the list box, call the function on each of the items. Cool. That's a lot simpler. And if that's the case, I just look up my plum box there, don't I? All right, so if I go ahead and, aha, we found an error. Excellent. It's in the border control. What do we have here? We have a border Lua 32. Oh, good, it's one of my functions. Attempt to index global parent. Oh, yes. Self.getParent. Self.getParent. That's the parent you mentioned. Yeah, I thought I found them all. I was wrong. Okay, so we can take a look at that. Okay, Stack Overflow, excellent. Love those. Oh, interesting. Yeah, I could see that. Okay, you know what? We're going to go ahead and get rid of all this stuff down here. Oh, you're absolutely right, EXO. Why am I even bothering with that parent? That's what I get for not paying attention to what I'm doing. Although, that Stack Overflow was also delightful. Okay, cool. So, we have a border. That's lovely to see. And if I go ahead and select Morganine, select Tidos. Now what I'm seeing here is that we're not selecting things right off the bat. And it's not guaranteed that the person will be selected when the row appears. Like I can go ahead and do it on turquoise, clear my selection. Turquoise is not the target. But when the row comes into existence, it could go ahead and check to see should I be highlighted or not. So that's actually a good thing we can do here, is we made the unilateral decision that this should be false, but in fact it's local player get target. That's going to be more complicated, isn't it? You know, I feel like I need a global function that it's just like is this me? Function, Soliloquy tracker row, am I the target? Is this row the target? And that's just going to say if, actually going to be very similar to the logic we had before. So local target equals local player, get target. If target is not equal to nil, then return target get name equals self dot patient name. Exo suggests is targeted, is row targeted. That's probably better. Naming things is hard for me. Is target. I like it. Or is targeted. Nope, I'm good with is target. I like it. Even shorter. All right, so we could combine this all into one statement, right? Of course, we could do, return local player get target does not equal nil, and local player get target get name equals, like, we could do that. I find compound statement like that harder to think about and harder to reason through and be like, does this look correct? And so I'll just break it into chunks like this. And if the thing that converts this into running code is any good, it's going to not care about those local variables. It's not going to be a performance issue. So we get a target. If it's not null, or nil, we go ahead and return this. Otherwise, it's always false. Okay. So set visible is target. We can then just do. Because the result of that is true or false, and that's exactly what we want for set visible. Okay, neat. Now we have an is target. Do we use that anywhere else? Handle target changed? No. Because this, we are getting a name. Okay, yeah, that is fine. All right, what happens then if we go ahead and say, do something on turquoise? Awesome, turquoise is targeted. Do it on Azure Stain, but then click off. Azure Stain doesn't have it. And then just no one. Okay, let's hide those. Then if I click on these, well, two of them aren't in my group, so I can't click through to them. But Morgan Each here, I can do. Okay, that's looking very promising. Now I am curious what happens if a highlighted row, actually you can't click through, but you can select them here. So what happens when a highlighted row expires? So go ahead and click on turquoise. Okay, that's fascinating. So there we can see the border jumped up to the upper left-hand corner. Might be exactly the kind of thing Exo was talking about. So we just want to go ahead and in Soliloquy tracker row, clean up that border. So there's two things here. The border, we pass in ourself. So we have a reference to border, border has a reference to us. That is a circular reference, and those kinds of things can be really annoying for garbage collectors. Now, a good garbage collector would see that nothing owns the row, and so both of them should be kind of cleaned up, but in this case, we can go ahead and detach. So let's go ahead and add function border detach. Self, let's see, set parent nil, and self set visible, set visible to false. Check if visible change triggers for the border. That's also a good idea. Actually, another question I have. Yeah, the border is not responding to F12 either. Okay, multiple things to think about. All right, so we already have some cleanup in here. So remove row. So we can go ahead and add self.border detach, and what the heck, self.border equals nil. Visible changed might cover that one too. Well, let's find out. Now, one of the things that we can take advantage of in testing is we can lie and say these things expire way faster than they do. So, Soliloquy of Spirit, 10 seconds, and our strength, 5 seconds. And we can see those timers are going to go way faster. All right, that one disappears, and then so does that one. Okay, that's promising. But we also saw that if we go ahead and clear the UI, oh, the border does go away in that case. It was just the the parent row disappearing really confused that border. Okay, that's very promising. Now, we in the window, and we can see this in our source control, remember we overrode that initial size. Well, we don't want that anymore, so we're just going to get rid of that. And the plum background. Well, one thing at a time. All right, let's come back in here. Plum background, we can see it's just a height of 1 pixel. Now we can see, well, we would see the plum background if we weren't covering it with a border. All right, now just go ahead and heal Morganite, who, unlike his compatriots, is not AFK. Excellent, we have a Morganite. Bam, okay. And healing AFK Turquoise. Okay, I am liking all things about this. Exo says, visible changed might cover that one. Doesn't seem to trigger visible change. Which one? Which part doesn't trigger that? Okay, so we have no more need of this plum color, so we can come on in here and discard that change. And then we have 2 changes to the window, which is we care about the target changed, and we care about, and then we have a function to handle that, which just passes it off to each row. Oh, Exo says the parent's visibility changing doesn't trigger the child's visibility changed. Are you sure? Like when I press F12 here, I think the only thing paying attention to it is the window. But let's find out. F12. Where on earth is that? Okay. Is there an F12 anywhere? There's not an F12. Ugh. All right. Toggle HUD. Hey, F12. Control plus that. Okay. Now at least we can find these things. Okay, so we have that defined and we're using it in Soliloquy Tracker window. There we go. Okay. So process key down. If that, we do an let's see. If it's toggle HUD, then self UI hidden, not that. Okay. And that is setting visible. So the self.window.setVisible is hiding the rows and therefore everything else, because I don't think they care about visibility. Nope. Okay. So just to see it in action, we have Tideless, we have a Morganite, both in the party, so both selectable, and that is a beautiful looking border. Azure Stain and Turquoise, not in the party, so the entity pass-through doesn't seem to work quite so well, but if you manually target them, we still see them selected if the names match. Excellent. Now, this actually will not work correctly if you have multiple things with the same name. Now, this doesn't happen with player characters, but anyone who has the wild root whistle knows that each of the things that comes out is titled root. And actually, that one's called the root. That's fascinating. And we can see here that it thinks that each one of these is the same name. Also, that's fascinating. The name comes through the API as the root, even though on screen they're both root. All three technically, but two of them are always overlapping. Fascinating. But as we can see, it thinks, even though that one has 2 and that one has 1, that the root collectively has 3. That's not correct, but since players can't have overlapping names, much to the chagrin, or much to the disappointment of players coming off of Bombadil, this is not a problem for us, right? And we never have meaningful NPCs with the same name that we care about healing. All right, if you're in the Rift and you have to protect what's her name? It's not Gladriel, but it's like Glathriel or something like that. If you have to protect her, she's the only one of her name, so it's not a problem. But it is an interesting side effect of the process we've taken here. All right, Exo says, it might just be me getting thrown by tree view again. Okay. Well, so far I'm not seeing a problem with this method. Now that we have a detached that separates the border from the parent and releases that circular reference, it doesn't seem to be a problem. Did we set border? Yeah, just for the kicks, we set border equals nil, so that object no longer has anything referring to it, and it's not referring to the parent either. Lovely. All right, now we haven't played around with set color. That might be interesting. We haven't played around with resizing the way I was thinking we might, but I am curious about just changing the thickness. So if we come back in here, thickness, there we go. What does it look like with a thickness of 4? All right, I've closed my plugin manager. Just open that up again. Oh, that is noticeable. But because it's extending outward from the row, target a character, how do I show UI? Do they remain targeted? Oh, interesting question. Exo's asking, if I target someone and then hide the UI and show the UI, yes. So because it's just the parent visibility going off and on, it seems to flow down the inheritance tree. And hide that, okay. Actually, what I'm more interested in is what if UI is hidden and comes back? Okay, that's good too. Excellent question, thank you, Exo. Cool. So we can see Morganite. I can't click Azure Stain, but if I select Azure Stain, that goes. Okay. Well, for the absurdity, let's do a 10 pixel border. Nice. I do not recommend this, but I think it's hilarious. Right? Really helps you notice what's going on here. All right, we're going to set that back to 2. Odd thing that I was curious about, as the redhead says, that's a big chunky border. Yes. So we have some color stuff going on. So for instance, the missing soliloquy color or the inner strength color. So I'm a little curious. All right, so if we do that, and if we do self border, all right, what do we call it? Set color, all right. For consistency, we should probably call that set back color. And then set back color. Exo says, now take it to the next level. Make the border animated. You know, I thought about doing like a blinking thing. We'll just settle for setting colors on the back on the border to match. I don't know if I would actually like this, but I want to see what it looks like. Okay, so yeah, that crashed. Okay, 3:11. Attempt at index field border. All right, that's exciting. Update UI. Okay, where does it come from? Self.border equals border. Yes. Is that happening after the call to update UI? It sure is. Okay, we're going to have to hoist this up. But the good news is, it doesn't depend on anything else. So as soon as we have set our size here, we can go ahead and include the border. Or can we? Border Stack Overflow. That's exciting. I love Stack Overflows. It's a sign that I've done something horribly wrong. Oh, of course. We have to dispatch this. So if you are, in fact, I don't even need a function for that, do I? Haha. Sorry, but if I did need a function for this, if I needed to pass that on, this colon notation is throwing a wrench into the works. And what we saw before is if you don't do the colon notation, is if you explicitly dispatch it based off of the control type and a dot notation function, then you can pass in self as a control to the control function. So this is how you would bypass this. But instead, I foolishly just said set that color. It just calls itself at the border level. That's terrible. I don't know why I thought that would work. Okay. Yeah, so not unexpectedly, if the border is the same color as the background, it does not do much for you. I mean, it makes it slightly bigger, but I can confirm that's a terrible idea and I should never have had it. So we're gonna come back out here and undo that. Okay, so border, border, and border. Now contrasting colors might actually be okay. So if we took this one down and that one up, that could be, it's probably gonna be hideous and terrible, but it will actually be visible at least. So there's the yellow one. And then as soon as these get out of, okay, there we go. Oh, yeah, that black color is no good. So yeah, changing the color of the border is a terrible idea. Don't do it. Oh, much better. I can see it. Okay. Now I could see a global change of the border being useful if someone wanted that to be always yellow or always green or something. That's fine. But yeah, that's not good. Blinking it could be interesting. Now that would be possible. We have a timer essentially going off, and these timers could tell us, "Hey, time has passed. Do something." I think that's overkill. I think we're good. So what does this look like? In the to-do file, we said add a border around selected target. Do something meaningful if our selection times out. And we've seen that it's fine because the border is owned by the row, not the window. When the row goes away, now that we have the detach, the border goes away too. So perfect. And we have our little logic here. We went ahead and used X's solution for the border instead, just using set stretch mode 1 so that we can draw outside of our parent's boundary because the normal rule is you can't draw outside of your parent's boundary. Excellent. Really nice idea there. Really a very smooth solution to the problem. I like it. Okay, so that was a thing. Let's go ahead and take a snapshot before we break something. All right, so add border around selected target. That's my commit message. That pretty much encapsulates what we're doing here. And we're going to go ahead and take that. The border here, you know what? I need attributions. Implementation based on Exogenesis 9's code in, what was the name of that server? I can't even tell. The server name is too long. Why is the server name so long? Okay, there we go. Okay, I can hover over on the left. The Lord of the Rings Discord. Add-ons channel. Okay. Great. EXO says, I don't know if I'd call completely disregarding the rules a smooth solution. You know, it's going to be very sad if someday SSG, if it's a bug, if set stretch mode being able to draw outside the parent is a bug, which it very well may be, if they fix that someday, it may cause a lot of plugins to suddenly stop working. Because it is nice to have a way to be like, yes, but I want to draw outside my parent. Have a bigger transparent parent then. I mean, I don't know what to tell you. Okay. Neat. In fact, I'm going to bump that up. Okay. So we have a constructor, we have a detach, resize. I'm not convinced we need that resize function now that I think about it. So I think that was overkill for what we're trying to do here. Oh, and we're going to check the blend mode. Okay, so I'm going to come back in. I just did a refactor off the cuff. It's probably going to work, but I do want to see it actually working before I start committing. Oh, no, it didn't work. It's terrible. What a world, what a world. All right, so that width and that height. We need to convert back in. Okay, there we go. Everything looks good there. Sweet. EXO asks, is line 21 still needed? Excellent question. I've just changed a bunch of things. So was that the set blend mode? I'm going to find out. Let's find out. This is long since moved. That'll teach me to not see things right away. Okay. Well, I would say this looks fine without the blend mode in this situation. Maybe if you're in a tree view or something more complicated. But that all looks great. You think one might be the default blend mode? It might actually. In fact, turbine.shell.writeLine blend mode. Well, let's find out. Self.cutout get blend mode. And interesting, blend mode defaults to 2. Now, we were looking at that. Blend mode 2 is the source color value. Blend mode 1 performs a blend. It might very well be because we have a completely nulled out color that they are being equivalent now. Okay, you got me curious. 1, 1. Okay, and then if the blend mode is 1, what's the difference? I'm not seeing a difference. That is so weird. Oh, the opacity. Oh, that opacity threw me. All right, so if the opacity is 0, it does not matter what the rest of it is. Oh, yeah, that'll do it. Okay, so blend mode 2, the default, uses only one of them. Cool. We said only doing color cut. I don't think it takes a single digit as opacity. I believe the color takes numbers between 0 and 1 and then scales them up to 255 under the covers. So if that was 0.5, then we can see that that's half of that. But what happens if we do blend mode 1, just out of curiosity? Probably it's going to look very similar. Yeah. Okay. But the opacity being completely 0, I think negates the problem. So I'm going to go ahead and say blend mode not needed. Oh, yes, yes. I see what you're saying. Yes, only doing color because you can pass in. Yes, if you only pass in 3 parameters, it's assumed to be red, green, blue. If you pass in 4, the first one is assumed to be opacity, then red, green, blue. Absolutely, you don't have to use a opacity parameter if it's going to be 100%. That is completely the case. Okay, this is looking pretty good. I'm going to go ahead and verify the border one more time. Awesome. Now, we had this little X button last time where you can just say, I don't want to track this person until the next time I enter or leave combat. But I had a note to myself that that should probably be entering a combat resets that. And I want to capture that note. Change X, ignore list to reset when entering combat. So what I found, currently it resets when you leave combat, but what was happening is we would finish a combat and there'd still be boxes there, and I know the next combat's not for a while, and I would just be like click, 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 and get rid of them. But then you have to enter and then leave a combat, and that was the wrong order to do it in. So that's a note for later. Okay, so we have this border with proper attribution. Excellent. All right, we have a bunch of stuff that we were going to delete. That was going to be the next thing. All right, let's just go ahead and delete this section. Easy enough to recreate. So we have the constructor and essentially a destructor. It's not really a destructor, but we're going to keep it called detach. And there we go. That's it. That's the whole thing. We have the declaration, the constructor, and a detach function. And anything else, like setback color, we can just make use of the fact that this is a control. Lovely. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and add that border. We'll go ahead and add that too. Let's see. Oh, I see. Yes. You know, these notes were mostly for myself. I wonder if it's useful to leave them in, though. Tell you what, let's go ahead and leave them in. But what's, oh, a tab, really? Okay. Let's go ahead and leave those in for a moment. We'll come back to that. Okay, we have the tracker row, so we have a border. We set up the border. We have the is target helper function, handle target changed, and take care of detaching it. Perfect. And then the window tracks when the target changes and lets each of the row know. Now, it would also be possible for each row to just request to be told when the target has changed, kind of, but multiple dispatch like that I don't think is natively supported by the LOTRO API. I think we can do that for our own events. I'm not certain that if you have a table of function pointers, that'll iterate through each of them and call them. Maybe someone who's played around with like add callback and remove callback can have a little bit more information on whether the native LOTRO API cares about that at all. But as it is, we could do that ourselves. In our main file, we could hook up to the target changed and then repass that on to a multi-dispatch situation. That would be fine. That's kind of what we're doing here. That's sort of a poor man's version of it. So anyway, just some thoughts as I'm committing this. So there's always different ways to do it. Exa says, I still want that detach to listen to parent visible change. Interesting. Which detach? The one in here? Why would we listen to parent visible changed here if we're getting rid of the parent? I'm not sure what you're hinting at there. But let me know. In the meantime, I'll proceed with taking a snapshot. In fact, I'm going to put back that dump function. Okay. Yeah, because Exo says you had to manually do it in the rest of the code. I'd want borders to handle their visibility themselves without needing to be told. I think that makes sense, except the condition on whether a border is visible is is based on whether the row is selected or not. I think what you're hinting at is that it'd be a cleaner solution if the row emitted a thing that says, my border should be on, and the border captured that, instead of the row saying, oh, I am targeted. Okay, it's a combination of the row being visible and that being the target for the actual border. Axel says, for this case, maybe unnecessary for an actual library, it should do it itself. So that's the only time when I change the visibility, I think. Border.set visible is initially, if we're targeted, the border should be on, but otherwise the border should just match the state of whether we're clicked on that player or not. And I'm not sure how the border would know about that without the border suddenly not being a generic border, but being this plugin specific border. That's a good point. Exo says, I think there's a difference in how we're thinking of it. You're not using it as border, you're using it as a highlight. Absolutely. That's a fair point. That's a fair point. And in my case, it is a conditional yes or no for the border, whereas if you're using it as a UI element, absolutely. If you hide the thing, the border could be hidden. That being said, because of this use case, it might be nice to have it be optional. Border should track parents' visibility or something, and if that's true, it can latch onto that from a library perspective. So, yeah, my assumption is that a border is a fixed element of display. Then you may have been screaming at your screen for the past hour and a half, and I apologize. All right, we'll finish this commit here. Nothing to worry about, nothing to worry about. Okay, add a border on selected target. Bam, pushed, or committed. Ducat says, just want to say thanks for the help last week. I got everything set up from a plugin. It works great. Awesome. Well, welcome back, and I'm glad it's working. And Exo says, all good, funny to watch ideas get repurposed. Yeah, but that's the thing. Like conceptually, I wasn't even thinking about this should always be on. It's like, no, it's I'm highlighting a thing. That's excellent. Oh, of course. I didn't actually commit that. Okay, we're going to commit that. And that change is going to be added a comment to key action with common binding. Okay, that was just a little helper for us. Now we can see we still have that debug function, we still have that debug option, and we still have this thing from weeks and weeks ago, maybe more than a month ago, where I kind of used MS Paint to say, this is kind of what I would like this thing to look like. And what I like about this, whoops, can I open it? Show in File Explorer. So what I like about this is if we come back into, let me get a couple of these up. If we come back in here, we can see there's a lot of similarity between design number 1 and what we've come up with. In fact, the version down here matches what we did with the tiers, and we can see multiples together side by side. Like all of this really came together very nicely. Obviously, the font's different. Oh, well, Happy New Year to you too, Rocky. Welcome. Let's see. Oh, I missed some chat. Awesome. Exo says, I swear, most Aura's users disable 95% of the plugins and just use the resource bars. You make a thing and it never gets used how you think. That's awesome. Codzella says, this is amazing. I didn't know LOTRO could be extended with Lua. Wow, absolutely. In fact, that's the entire focus of my particular stream on the LOTRO stream is talking about plugins. As we can see here, I have a number of plugins in my plugin manager here, and yes, they are written in Lua, and they use the LOTRO API, which can be both downloaded and used locally, and you can also just use the one on the LOTRO interface wiki. And that API shows you how to make windows appear, how to respond to user input, that sort of thing. It's funny. I'm not fluent enough in German to be confident that says Happy New Year, but it looks like Happy New Year. So I'm gonna say it was Happy New Year, and thank you very much. Exo says writing plugins is niche, but username is too good of a quality of life thing to ignore. Absolutely. I definitely gravitate towards the plugins that I feel enhance my play of the game, either because it helps me solve some sort of a goal, like with the deed tracker of, oh yeah, the deeds in the game are meant to encourage you to go explore different areas of the game. So, knowing that you haven't missed any helps you be confident that you've seen all the parts of the game that you were meant to see. Or, that hunter deadly decoy that we talked about. If I'm playing a hunter, I would like to know when my deadly decoy is going to blow up, right? That's just a thing for me. Or even for some people, the opaque quest tracker, which is it's like, hey, the quest text is hard to read. Let's put an opaque box behind it, right? Okay, so that's excellent. Was there anything else that really needed to get done before we can just ship this thing out and call it good? Oh, excellent. Rocky has confirmed. It is. Happy New Year in German. Excellent. Oh, Exo says, loving the Virtue XP / LP total tracking on D-Tracker, by the way. Well, thank you very much. D-Tracker, if you have not seen it, is a different plugin that I made that does its best to tell you about all the different deeds in Lord of the Rings Online. And more specifically, here's a little button. And more specifically, how many LOTRO points and Virtue XP you can get by completing them. So for instance, because this thing doesn't realize I've already done them, it thinks there's 300 LOTRO points and 900,000 Virtue experience available for me in Breeland. Many of which are in the Wildwood, of course. Whereas in the Shire, 150 LOTRO points, 36,000. Because we don't have the South Farthings yet, I'm hoping that'll add a few more thousand Virtue XP. I kid. There's no plans for that yet. Light says hello. Well, hello to you. Okay, so yes, the deed tracker shows you a run-up of how many LOTRO points and VXP, Virtue XP, you can get from deeds, how many in that category, how many on that page. So we can see on this page it thinks 2,500 LOTRO points and 545,000 Virtue experience. And that's really useful to me because you can expand the game. You can be a completely free-to-play player and buy quest packs and expansion stuff using LOTRO points. And it's really nice to know that this level 139 character has over 12,000 LOTRO points available if I just go play the game. And that's per character. So if you're like me and you have multiple characters, that's that much per character. So that's 25,000, 75,000, however many. Light says, have I found the Silmaril? I have not found any Silmaril yet. Though we do have some pretty cool light hope-related mechanisms in Lord of the Rings Online. So, for instance, the Edhilharn tokens are nice little, sticks of light that you hold up, and everything's a little bit more hopeful for a little while, and that's nice. Okay, so on that to-do file, oh yes, there were one or two more things, and we have just enough time to look at them. So, something I mentioned before is if I actually remember to load the plugin, if I'm targeting someone, and then I hit this X button, I have to enter combat, and then leave combat in order to reset that I'm ignoring this character. It says there are 3 Silmarils, Yes, I've heard their fate is uncertain. The Lord of the Rings game doesn't spend a lot of time focused on the Silmaril because of their lost status. So we don't get into it very much. I don't know what the exclamation point drop command might do in other places, but it doesn't seem to do anything here, Code Zealot. Okay. Cool. So let's take a look at that ignore. We have the concept of an ignore player list. And we can see that handle combat changed if we're if in combat is false, that is if we are leaving combat, then we're going to reset that list. And I think instead we want to set that to true. If we're entering combat, then it's a brand new game. And that's a really simple change. And if we come into the plugin manager, unload, and then reload, then if I go ahead and ignore Morganite, I'm not in combat. Okay, so, but that ignore list is there, so I can keep on doing this on Morganite. Doesn't work. But if I go ahead and use the debug function to enter combat, bam, it works again. So, oh no, an orc jumped out, and now I actually care about this. So if I click that X button, they're back on the ignore list. And now we exit combat, and they're still on the ignore list. That's probably a little bit closer. Maybe I probably don't care about that until the next time we leave and then enter combat. Awesome. Exo thinks Lobelia stole the Silmarilla. It was in that box of spoons. Maybe. And Prime should probably go on the list. I think, Exo, there may be a character limit on the output of MooBot commands, but I can definitely pass that suggestion on to the people who control such things and let them, let them determine whether or not that is a thing. There you go. Though technically that's a list of what what the streamers recommend. And so if none of the streamers recommend it, I don't know that we can put it there. I kid. Okay, cool. So that's a really simple one. Glad to get that one done. It was just bothering me a little bit while we were finishing up our Storvagun runs on Treebeard. And yeah, Storvagun would finish and it'd be like, I want to click these X's to get rid of them, but we're already out of combat. And it's just not good. So let's go ahead and change X to ignore list to reset when entering combat. Done. All right. And the actual change was just true to false. Bam. So we'll go ahead and commit those. What else do we have? Oh, a renaming thing. We could do that while we're thinking about things. Sure. Okay, so remove soliloquy row. All right, that seems like a pretty simple change. We're going to go ahead and double check ourselves. Let that start running in the background. Okay, so, but if that was valid, then we'll be done with this. In fact, I could go ahead and just do a recursive search. Row, 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 done. Okay, we're good. Okay, that's excellent. Soliloquy tracker row and row. And we'll just use that as the commit message. Lovely. And does it work? Bam. So this is, of course, a problem with developing in Lua, is assuming the code compiles, then you won't find out about any errors until you try to execute that code. And then you might have nil references or some other sort of logical error. But code error just isn't found right away, but logical errors you only find when you exercise that code. So if you change something, it's a good idea to make sure that the thing works. And you'll see that sometimes in much bigger plugins like Titan Bar comes to mind, where one of the currencies wasn't working. And it was just because of some typos in code. But because the typos weren't a syntax error, it would never cause any problems until you tried to track that specific currency as an independent item on the bar. And then an exception was thrown. And so if your project gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, it's good to have a sense of here are the steps to exercise all of the code, or here are buttons like we have in this debug section of the options to just trigger things that are maybe a little bit harder to trigger normally. Exo says, I like my logical errors. Fair enough, fair enough. This is just in case you don't like them. Okay, so if Soliloquy tracker is turned off, make sure to exit early from chat monitoring. This was a thought I had, was what's going on with chat monitoring? Because I can't remember that at all. So we have a chat received function here, which is being rebroadcast from the turbine.chat.received anonymous function. Great. So how do we pay attention to the option that says use Soliloquy tracker? Because one thing about monitoring chat is you don't want to do that if you don't need to. It slows performance down just a little bit every time you have to parse through a chat line. And there's a lot of chat. Even if you're only looking at combat, there's still a lot of chat. So where do we pay attention to that? Well, we can come into the options and say ignore. No, sorry, use Soliloquy. And we have self.settings set Soliloquy window used. Great. Well, there's a settings, Soliloquy window used. And we have a Git version of that. So the real question is, where do we use that? Oh, actually, another question, what happens if it changes? So we have Git, we have set, and then we have Soliloquy used changed. Okay, that's excellent. So how do we care about that? Okay, in this case, that's used to update the UI. Cool. But we might want to know about that other places as well. I don't know if we have a good way to do that. Where is that? Settings, okay. Oh no, this is using, it says Soliloquy used, okay. Of course, I searched for the wrong thing. Okay, so Soliloquy window used, self that, okay. And Soliloquy tracker window, perfect, okay. So self.used is where we're tracking that. That makes sense. And where else are we paying attention to it? A thing that we could do is enable and disable this chat received based on whether we are being used. Maybe we don't ask for chat at all. So if not self.used, then, or actually if self.used, then else. And this could look like this, where we go ahead and say turbine.chat received equals that, or it equals nil. I assume that's a valid thing to do. We'll find out. And if that's the case, we can verify that by coming back in here to the chat monitoring and say turbine.shell.writeLine chat received, and go ahead and just spit that back out to args.message. Okay, yeah. So if we come in here, we can see chat received, awesome. And if we come in to turn that off, we can see we're no longer monitoring chat, which feels like a performance win straight up. Not having to do pattern matching to figure out if something matches and saying, oh no, it doesn't match. Depending on the underlying functionality behind the pattern matching, they might be bailing out on as early as possible, but they still have to determine that this does not exist somewhere. So, if the chat message doesn't have a BE anywhere, you have to scan the whole string to kind of confirm that. And there's ways to optimize that, but it's still just not having to do it at all makes sense. The other thing was, okay, we're in chat received, but here we could check if we're not being used, return, but that still requires a function dispatch. We have to be called, maybe better to just not be notified at all. Now the other half of it is, where else is self.used used? It hides itself, sure. But we can do the same thing. If self.used, then go ahead and register for the chat, because we know when that changes, we'll go ahead and get registered. So if we go ahead and unload, load, we can see that we're not using the Soliloquy tracker. Oh, but we still got that. What's going on with that? If self.use. Well, where is that being set? We're getting that. Where else is this getting set? Oh, of course. Oh, nuts. Well, this was interesting, though. So, once upon a time, I wrote some code that was self-defeating. So, what's going on here? We are saying here, turbine.chat.received is being set to an anonymous function. This is, again, it's a single dispatch system. There's either a function there or there's not. There's no multiple functions getting dispatched from a list of functions going on here. And so the thought was, what happens if all of the system, or more than one part of the system wants to know about chat? Well, we could have a multiple dispatch here where we go ahead and get chat received and then send it to whoever cares about it. And the problem is that might have been over engineering because right now no one but the Soliloquy tracker window cares about it. And so it might be just easier not to bother with that. In which case, we can take out the call to it and the dispatch here. And if that's the case, we can come back in and right off the bat, there's no monitoring. We can see the chat is not coming in. And only after we enable the Soliloquy tracker, then we start caring about combat. That's probably the right direction to go right now. I think the person who put out minstrel buffs, they may not be an active plugin developer anymore, so I don't think we have to worry about conflicts there. And if someone else wants to have chat monitoring capabilities, we can always put that kind of thing back in with a central dispatch and deal with it at a higher level. For instance, you could have the main one have a flag that says which parts care about this, and we could toggle that based off of this use. But that being said, we now have a way to opt into this chat monitoring right here. Oh, thanks, Mobile. Tuesday streamers are me. I believe Shore the Skies will only be back in a couple of weeks. That's good. He should be listed. Okay. So yes. Now the thing that bothers me about what we just did there is that this is kind of repetitive, right? Like checking for self.use, setting up the chat. It really feels like that should just be in a function, right? We could just have a function, so like a tracker window, enable, disable chat monitoring. I don't know. Naming things is hard, but it's something like that, right? Like set up, or I don't know. We'll call it that. And then we can just go ahead and say used if we want to allow that parameter to come in, or we can use self.used if we don't care about that being overridable. Right now, I don't care, but we could come back in later. And then we can do the same thing. We can actually have the whole thing right here. This is the logic. If self.used, then that, otherwise that. And then we can go ahead and enable, disable chat monitoring, get rid of that. But we can do the same thing here, where enable, disable chat monitoring. And that should work just the same. So if we come on in, we can see use Soliloquy is active. So if we go ahead and use this power, yep, monitoring is there. And then if I go ahead and unclick that, we stop receiving those monitoring alerts because we're no longer monitoring chat. If I go ahead and enable it again, we're going to see those come on through again. Perfect. That's exactly what I was hoping for, was a minimum impact. So if you're never using this, you're not suffering any performance penalty. Okay. Well, let's go ahead and take a snapshot of those changes because they're a little bit more far-ranging. Don't monitor chat if Soliloquy of Spirit is disabled. There we go. Now we can see we're going to go ahead and discard that other chat logger. Oops, no, sorry. We're going to stage that other, and we're going to stage the removal of both of those. We're going to go ahead and, let's see. We want to call that function, yeah. We want to call that function. We want that function to exist. And, oh, I forgot to take off that debugging. Excellent. Well, this is why we have source control. All right, shell. We're going to go ahead and kill that addition. And that was just removing some new lines. That's fine. Okay, and these were all the things that we haven't committed yet. Oh, excellent. Very good. It looks like these cousins are going away. That's okay. We've had some really excellent progress on making sure that borders are present or not present, as the case may be. All right, Azure Student, I'm going to hit you with one more. Aha! Lovely. Well, that's interesting. That was supposed to be on turquoise. There we go. All right, I'm still very pleased with this border, and I really do appreciate you just jumping in there, EXO, and just trying out some code and seeing what works. That is great. Oh, that's interesting. Sorry, I'm playing around to make sure that the mouse is going through correctly. Oh, that's what it was. And if I'm clicking on something behind, it is sometimes messing it up. Exo says, I can't complain. I whipped up random code. Someone else debugged it. Well, there we go. I can't say there were that many bugs to debug, but there we go. So yes, lovely border. Thank you so much. Okay, so what do we have? Anything else on that to do? Oh, right. This was a funny one. Soliloquy tracker window. I'm going to close a few other things here. Is a window, which is fine, but then it contains a window. And this is just a weirdness. And so I think that is wrong. I think that is not at all correct. But it's a larger change to fix it. And it's fine. It's fine. Like having a window instead of window isn't inherently wrong. It just, I started down the path of this is a window, and then I changed to this has a window. And is a and has a relationships are kind of fundamentally different, and I should fix that. But it's not important for a version 1. All right. Another thing I wanted to do was know if Soliloquy of Spirit is trained. And I know how to do that when you log in. We can check your trained skills and see, do you know how to do this? What I'm not sure of is, can we monitor the changing of a stance from blue line to red line? I suspect this is possible. I just don't know how to do it. And so I don't think that's a big deal for version 1. You can all just manually turn it off. Oh, hey, Exo says Auras does it. Sweet. All right. Lovely. Thank you so much. I'll look at that. Cool. So we have a reference. Like I've said many times in the past, if I don't know how something's done, but I know another plugin does it, that gives me a lot of hope that I can do it too. Okay. Same thing. If we don't have Soliloquy of Spirit. Yeah, if we don't have Soliloquy of Spirit, we should not bother monitoring chat. That's for if you're toggling between blue line and other lines. You want to make you don't want to have to click that. Okay, and localizing the chat. Localizing the chat is important. So I think we have one more week. I'm going to bump it up to the top. And the rest of this is just nice to haves. I think I'm being called to a tier 3 raid over on Treebeard though, and this has been an excellent progress made for this tracker. If you'd like to receive a beta version of it, just to play around because you're a minstrel and you love the idea of it, just give me a shout out, either in chat real fast or just send me a message on something. You can do tithe those on Evernight, and you can also message me at, LOTRODtracker@gmail.com. That's totally fine too. Cool. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap up here. I'm going to take a drink. If you have any last minute thoughts, pop them in chat real fast. And then otherwise, we'll check out those questions next week. All right. Well, hearing none, this has been fantastic. Thank you all so much for your thoughts, ideas, contributions, everything. This has been great. All right. Where's that window? I had a note on there. I wanted to make sure. Okay. Yep. That's everything. That's all we're going to cover today. Thank you so much for joining me on this exploration of LOTRO plugins. I do hope to see you next week. And until then, keep plugging along. All right. Bye-bye now.